support us in doing. The Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous tells us that if you got this thing, this illness we call alcoholism, your only shot at getting better, really, is what the book describes as a complete psychic change. You will not have a complete psychic change in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Why is that? Because the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous was not designed to produce a complete psychic change in an alcoholic. The Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous was designed as a place for the alcoholic to come and receive love and support while they have a complete psychic change. But that psychic change happens in the program. The program is the first 164 pages of the book called Alcoholics Anonymous, which is our basic text, and like any textbook, it's meant to be gone through with a teacher. We happen to call our teachers sponsors. That's the deal. It's really important that you understand that. So tonight, we're going to go over the first three steps, steps 1, 2, and 3, which are often called our preparation steps, in that they are the preparation for the program of action. So if you take the 12 steps, 1, 2, and 3 prepare us for the work. The work itself, the actual recovery, is steps 4 through 9. And then steps 10, 11, and 12 are the maintenance and growth work. That's how we maintain and grow what we get from 4 through 9, which is recovery. Okay, so 1, 2, and 3 are all about preparation. We're not really going to do any changing in 1, 2, and 3. We're preparing to change. So step 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. I should also mention there is a principle, not from the Big Book. This is actually more archaic. This actually comes more through the vocal tradition of Alcoholics Anonymous. But there are principles associated with every one of the steps. There are 12 principles that co-align with the 12 steps. So the principle of step 1 is truth. It's truth, right? So we're really going to see the truth in step 1 because it's about the jump from denial to awareness. Step 1 is all about accepting what our problem is. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. In the chapter called The Doctor's Opinion, which is the first chapter in the book, it's the chapter before chapter 1, the chapter that's got the Roman numerals and the little lettering. Okay? If you would turn to the first page of that chapter, which is Roman numeral 25, XXV, the first letter from Dr. William Duncan Silkworth. And so the chapter is comprised mainly of 2 letters written by Dr. Silkworth, who was Bill W.'s doctor at Towns Hospital. Dr. William Silkworth was one of the foremost experts on alcoholism in the country, if not in the world, at that time. So Dr. Silkworth wrote 2 letters that make up the majority of the doctor's opinion. The first letter from Dr. Silkworth, you'll see there on that page. The third line of that letter, starting with in late 1934, right? The doctor tells us in late 1934, I attended a patient. So Silkworth is talking about Bill Wilson, that's the patient, who, though he had been a competent businessman of good earning capacity, which basically means Bill W. was a manageable alcoholic for a really long time, which is sort of another way of saying he was a remarkable bullshit artist. Very good at what he did. Bill W. kept it going for a long time before he became a completely unmanageable, unemployable drunk trying to kill, actively killing himself. He was a competent businessman of good earning capacity who was an alcoholic of a type I had come to regard as hopeless. Remember, seemingly hopeless case of mind and body, right? So this doctor, Silkworth, who had, by the way, worked with tens of thousands of alcoholics by this time, by the time he's writing these letters, is basically telling you, look, I've seen a lot of drunks in my time. This cat Wilson, forget about it. He's hopeless. He's a goner. That's what he's telling you, okay? In the course of his third treatment, Bill Wilson's, the third treatment at Towns Hospital for alcoholism was electroshock therapy. Right? So in the course of his third treatment, he's on his third go-round now, and they're attaching electrodes to his head. He acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. Those ideas come to Bill through a guy named Ebby Thatcher. So Bill gets these ideas about recovery from a man named Ebby Thatcher, who we'll talk about in step 2. Ebby got these ideas from the Oxford group, which is the Christian group that predates Alcoholics Anonymous. The 12 steps of AA come from the 6 concepts of the Oxford group. So Dr. Silkworth is telling us this guy, Bill Wilson, gets these ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. As part of his rehabilitation, as part of his getting better, he commenced to present those ideas, that they must do likewise with still others, that these people he's helping have to help other people. This has become the basis, the foundation of a rapidly growing fellowship, which is still rapidly growing. It's the same fellowship we're a part of. Over 100 of these men and their families appear to have recovered. They seem to have gotten better. Right? Notice the word being used here is recovered, not recovering. This is really important. The idea that we in AA are always recovering alcoholics is wrong, dead wrong, incorrect. If you want to test that out for yourself, you can actually look at the title page of the book you're holding, which tells you that the big book is the story of how over 100 men and women have recovered from alcoholism, not are recovering. It actually says 15 different times, and I'm not going to start page quoting now, but you'll have to trust me. It says 15 different times in the first 164 pages of the big book, which are our program, that we do recover from a hopeless state of mind and body. The word recovering shows up in the big book exactly twice. Both times speaks to a temporary condition. So when the alcoholic starts making their amends in 9 and moves into the maintenance and growth steps in 10, 11, and 12, that is the point at which they become a recovered alcoholic. That's not up for debate. That's not Michael's opinion. That's a fact. It's a fact because it's in our literature. So remember, when you're in the rooms of AA and you get information from someone that you're not sure about, ask them. I would at least empower you to ask them, where does what you just said show up in our literature? If they say that they don't know or they don't have an answer for you, you're getting the opinion of an addict. If you want the opinions of addicts or alcoholics, you're more than welcome to them. History shows you're not going to build a genuine recovery on them, so be cautious. If you look at page 28, Roman numeral 28, XXVIII, the first full paragraph on that page. First full paragraph, which is at the end of the first letter from the doctor. Right? So this is part of the doctor's opinion. There's a couple of parts that are in fact written by Bill in the first 100. So after that first letter, it says, we believe, and so suggested a few years ago, I'm sorry, actually, this is actually written by Dr. Silkworth. We believe and so suggested a few years ago that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy. An allergy, it's an important word. That the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. Okay, so a couple of things here. One, we've just found out we have an allergy to alcohol, which basically means we have as alcoholics have a physical reaction to alcohol that is not normal. The way alcohol affects our bodies is not how alcohol is supposed to affect someone's body. The manifestation of our allergy to alcohol is such that once the alcoholic has a drink, they have no ability to determine how many drinks will follow that first one. Yes, sir?
Does that allergy theory still hold up with science today?
The question of whether or not it functions a little bit different than other allergies is a question with genuine utility, in that the people writing this book were not doctors. And yes, science has shown that perhaps illness is a more spot-on term than allergy. With that said, ultimately the definition of an allergy is an abnormal reaction to something. There is no question that the reaction alcoholics have to alcohol is abnormal. And actually, using that as a jumping off point, I appreciate the question. Let's take something else and use it as a comparison point, something else that people are allergic to. And in terms of allergies, obviously some manifestations of allergies are simply irritating, right? And some are deadly. So let's pick one that can actually kill somebody, because certainly the allergy to alcohol or illness or whatever we're calling it can absolutely kill us, is deadly for us. So let's take peanuts. Is anybody actually allergic to peanuts here? Okay. The manifestation of an allergy to peanuts is throat constriction, which can absolutely kill you. Right? So somebody who's allergic to peanuts eats peanuts and probably is going to be rushed to the hospital and may in fact not survive. Now here's what's interesting about that. There are many people that develop an allergy to peanuts over time, right? So let's take a 19-year-old who has spent a lifetime eating peanuts and then all of a sudden develops this allergy. So one day they pick up a handful of peanuts, toss them back, and their throat closes up to the size of a pinhole, and the ambulance is called and they rush to the hospital. They live, right? And they say to the doctor, once they're conscious again, wow, doc, that was awful. I mean, that was really unpleasant. You know, that whole getting rushed to the hospital thing and almost dying, I don't want to do that anymore. Any medical advice as to how I could avoid, ending back up here? And the doctor says, yeah, don't eat peanuts, right? And then here's what's remarkable. He doesn't eat them again, ever, no matter how much he liked them. I mean, it's possible he was eating them every morning, 3 times a day, never eats them again, never, right? This is why we don't currently have a Peanuts Anonymous, right? It's also currently why there's no Peanuts Anonymous being planned. Because someone who's allergic to peanuts has only a physical allergy, and this is probably the distinction, is that we have more than a physical allergy. Our allergy is one component of 2, right? But the person who has peanuts has only a physical allergy, who's allergic to peanuts. So when they come to the conclusion that when putting peanuts into their body, they really don't like what happens, they're able to come to the same conclusion, oh, I just won't do it anymore. Because when I eat peanuts, bad stuff seems to happen. So if I don't eat peanuts, probably that bad stuff won't happen anymore. I won't eat peanuts anymore. Now the alcoholic has that same conversation with themselves, most of us, multiple times, right? So we don't necessarily end up in the hospital on the back end of throat closure. Maybe we end up on the linoleum with our head next to the toilet after a 3-day binge. But oftentimes the conversation is the same. Wow, that was bad. That was terrible. You know, we've missed 3 days of work. The wife is gone again. We bounced a couple checks. You know, it's bad stuff. And you're laying there on the linoleum thinking to yourself, wow, I can't do this anymore. I don't want this anymore. I bet if I don't drink anymore, this stuff won't happen anymore. And we say, just like the guy in the hospital with the peanuts, I'm done. I'm not going to do this again. And I would offer to you that the alcoholic at that moment means it just as much as the guy in the hospital who says, I'm not going to eat peanuts anymore. But somehow, we're drinking again later that day, or by the end of the weekend, or later that week. But eventually, we pick it up again. So what's the story with that? Is it possible that the allergy to alcohol is more intense than the allergy to peanuts? No. An allergy is an allergy. An abnormal reaction is an abnormal reaction. And the manifestation of an abnormal reaction is the manifestation of an abnormal reaction. So the bottom line for people like us is once we take a drink, we have no ability to determine how many more drinks are going to follow that first one. Might be 2, might be 30, depending on what night you catch us. But we never know which way it's going to go. That's not normal. My wife, Lori, not an alcoholic. There's alcohol in my home. Lori drinks alcohol, right? I've known Lori for 13 years, and there's no reason to believe, as far as I know, that this has ever happened previous to our meeting, that Lori has never, as far as I know, thought to herself, I'm going to have 1 glass of wine, and had 3. I don't know that she's ever thought to herself, okay, I'm going to have 1 shot of vodka with my friends here, and knocked out half a bottle. Never. Why? She's not an alcoholic, right? What we just read in the literature said, this never occurs, this phenomenon of craving, the phenomenon of craving. That means, so if you're not drinking and you say to yourself, I'm really craving a drink, no, you're not. That's not the phenomenon of craving. To experience the phenomenon of craving, you may be desiring a drink, but that's not the phenomenon of craving. The phenomenon of craving happens once we take a drink. So another way to explain that would be, let's go back to my wife for a moment. Let's say my wife and I, all day long, have been fantasizing about a glass of Merlot. Both of us, for our own reasons, all day long, just thinking like, wow, just a glass of Merlot, right? And when day is done, we sit down on the couch, we pull out 2 nice goblets, and we pour 2 glasses of Merlot. When Lori drinks her glass of Merlot, her desire for Merlot will be satisfied. That's a normal reaction to alcohol, right? She was desiring Merlot, she drank some Merlot, her desire satisfied. When I drink my Merlot, my desire for Merlot will be amplified. That's abnormal. That's the phenomenon of craving. That phenomenon never occurs in the average temperate drinker. That's what the text tells us. Never occurs, not sometimes. So, it doesn't have to happen to you every time. In most cases, it probably won't. So if you're someone that every single time you drank, you went hog wild, fine. But if that only happened to you 40% of the time, that doesn't mean you're not an alcoholic. And a lot of people get this wrong. They come into AA and they say to themselves early on, you know, there were nights where I had 3 drinks and went home. So maybe I'm not an alcoholic. It doesn't work that way. The manifestation of the allergy is we just never know which way it's going to go. It's always Russian roulette. Once I take one, I don't know what's going to happen. So if I'm on the way back from a meeting and I call Lori and I say, hey, did you make dinner? And she says, I did. It'll be on the table at 7. And I say, okay, terrific. I'm on my way back. I'm going to stop at the pub and have a quick one, and then I'll be home for dinner. If I actually go into the pub and have one, I don't know if I'll be home for dinner. But here's the thing. Might be. I might be. There were nights I was 15 minutes early with flowers, right? There were other nights where I ended up in Skokie 3 days later and don't know how I got there. I never knew which way it was going to go. That's the physical allergy to alcohol. Now, the answer to that physical allergy seems almost ridiculously simple. Don't do it. A monkey could figure that out. Truly. In fact, my guess is that monkeys have figured that out. I would bet you, if you went into the jungle and found a monkey and started tracking that monkey, following them wherever they went, and at some point that monkey landed on a bush and pulled a berry off a bush and ate it and swallowed it and became violently ill, you could follow that monkey around for the rest of its natural life, and it'll never eat one of those berries again. That monkey just figured out the physical allergy. Somehow we can't do it, in spite of mountains of data that tell us exactly what's going to happen if we drink one drink. We somehow go back and do it again. Why? Because we have more than just a physical allergy. There's another component. Now, if you look on Roman numeral 27, XXVII, last full paragraph on that page, it says men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. What does that mean? It means it works. That's what it means. It works. Alcohol does what we want it to do pretty much every time we want it to do it. We're not dumb people. That's one thing about addicts and alcoholics. Dumb people can't pull this off. It's too much work. The lying and the hiding and the finagling. You got to have a decent brain to pull off being an addict of any kind for any decent amount of time, right? So I'm not a fool. I drank alcohol the way I drank it because it worked. I mean, the 2 things I believed throughout my childhood, and I don't know that I could have put them in this words then, but 2 things I absolutely believed were true for the first decade and a half of my life were, 1, that I was broken in a way that no other human being had ever been broken in the history of the world. And 2, whatever it was that was wrong with me could not possibly be fixed. When I was 14 years old, someone gave me an aluminum can of liquid, and 14 years of fear went away. And I asked myself what I still believe to be an unbelievably logical, intelligent question. Where's more of this? Where is more of this? How do I get more of it, and how do I never run out of it? Because this is the elixir I've been looking for. If you've been scared for 14 years, and you drink an aluminum can of liquid, and all those fears go away, and you don't look for more, you're really nuts. There's really something wrong with you. I drank because it worked. It silenced the noise in my head. Until it didn't. One day it stopped. Right? That's what alcohol didn't tell me. That sooner or later it would stop working. That's what I didn't know. That's why it's a deal with the devil. Right? Because I'm 14 years old and alcohol puts its arm around me and says, listen kid, me and you, we're all good. From here on in, it's all good. You're going to be able to live in your skin, talk to girls, feel like one of the people, blah, 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 right? And who wouldn't love that? Right? But alcohol didn't tell me there will come a time where I will stop silencing the screams in your head and begin making them louder. I didn't know that was going to happen. So men and women drink, essentially, coming back to the text, because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive, sneaky, that while they admit it is injurious, obviously this is hurting me, obviously, right? They cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. I don't know what's fact and what's fiction anymore. It's the life of the addict. I can't see the truth anymore. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. I didn't know another way to live. I didn't know you people were doing this. You know, it's not like when I was 8, my parents, or 3, you know, my parents sat me down and said, okay, listen, there's 2 ways you can go here. You can go this way, which will lead you to happy, joyous, and free. Or you can go this way, which will lead you to restless, irritable, discontent, hating yourself every single day, deep, deep amounts of self-loathing, and constant sabotage. And I said, oh, let's do that one. My parents passed on to me what they had. I mean, it's a family disease, addiction. Passes its way down through generations. It's not like my parents had good information in the attic and said, let's just fuck him up for fun. That's not what happened. Right? So my alcoholic life seems the only normal one. It's the only one I knew until I got to you people. Now here's the key to this paragraph. They are restless, irritable, and discontent unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks. Restless, irritable, and discontent. The first time I read those 3 words in our basic text, I was convinced someone had been following me around. I had never seen me summed up so effectively as restless, irritable, and discontent. This is what we call the mental obsession. The mental obsession, which means that when an alcoholic comes off the binge, isn't drinking anymore, and they come out of the haze, even though they say to themselves, I'm never doing this again, this disease demands that they will eventually, probably quickly, become restless, irritable, and discontent, which is another way of saying can't live comfortably in their own skin. And that will become more painful until eventually their ability to live in their own skin will become so compromised that they will reach for the only thing they know of which will quell the pain, which is a drink. They will take that drink, trigger the physical allergy again, and off to the races they go. Right? So this thing we call alcoholism is physical allergy giving way to mental obsession, giving way to physical allergy, giving way to mental obsession. Right? Did you ever see, the recycling arrows that they have on the big plastic garbage cans? Think of that. It's a cycle we can't break. We're trapped. We're just going round in circles. It was 2 on 1 from the beginning. Physical allergy giving way to mental obsession. Different than the guy who's allergic to peanuts. He doesn't have a mental obsession. So when he decides, that's it, I'm not eating peanuts anymore, he doesn't go home and find himself unable to live in his own skin because he doesn't have peanuts. He might miss them, but he'll be able to stay away from them. We can't, because we are trapped in this cycle called alcoholism. So the first step question right? If you want to know, oh, okay, are there directions for the first step? There's directions for every step. Okay, here's the directions for the first step. Look at page 30, and we're now looking, this is regular, not Roman numeral, page 30. Look at the second paragraph on that page, and you will find your directions for the first step. We learned, this is what we learned, that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves. We really had to grasp this on a very real and deep level, that we were alcoholics. Because now you have what you need, care of Dr. Silkworth, to diagnose yourself. Right? Alcoholism isn't about how much you drink or how often you drink. There are people who drink 2/5 a day who are not alcoholics. There are people who drink twice a month who are alcoholics. Do you have the physical allergy? Have you had the experience ever of your booze getting away from you? And have you had the experience of saying, that's it, no more, but somehow couldn't keep yourself from picking it up again? If you can say yes to those two things, you're probably an alcoholic. We needed to concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholic. That's the first step. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion, remember, we have trouble differentiating the true from the false. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently maybe might ever become like other people, has to be, what? Smashed. That's a big word, right? It doesn't say that delusion needs to be, put aside or placed on the shelf or considered carefully. That delusion has to be smashed. You have got to wave the white flag with fervor to do the first step. And quite frankly, if you or anybody you know has ever come in and then gone back out and drank again, that's a first step issue. It's the only way to go back out is on the first step. Because if you go back out, you go back out looking for power. You've lost the sight that you're powerless. That's what the first step is about. I am powerless. Left to my own power, I have no shot. There's no way for me to do this alone. Okay? Based on that data, based on that information, how many people in here can concede to their innermost selves that they qualify? Okay, so if you just raised your hand, you've just done the first step. You're now on step 2. Let me be clear. That's not my opinion. That's right out of our text. Has anybody in here ever been told that the rate at which they go through the 12 steps is determined by their sponsor? Hands? Okay, wrong. Not a little wrong, not maybe wrong, dead wrong. The rate at which you go through the steps is not determined by your sponsor. That is an abuse of power. The book is absolutely clear about the rate at which you go through the steps. When is it time to do step 2? We just found out after you finish step 1. I know it's time to do a 5th step with a sponsee when they finish the 4th step. I hear people all the time, yeah, I've been around a year and a half. Oh, you got a sponsor? Mm-hmm. You do step work? Yeah, I'm on step 2. Oh, why are you not past step 2? I don't know, my sponsor said I'm not ready for step 3. Oh, you're not ready. What do you mean? What does that mean? What are you not ready for? I don't know, that's what they told me. Did you ask for any further information? No, I mean, it's my sponsor. He'll let me know, right? Wow. That guy's got an excellent chance of dying. Excellent. And if that sponsor wants to tell themselves they have nothing to do with that, that's their business. But we do have a responsibility to carry the message, not our message. That's why I'm not here to carry you my message. Why? Because my message will kill you. My message nearly killed me. I'm sure it will kill you. And we have a basic text with a message that when worked, works. So you don't have to be on step 2. That's your business. But it doesn't change the fact that you are. Okay, you've done the first step. So now we know what our problem is. Right? Our problem is not alcohol. Alcohol is a manifestation of our problem. Your problem is not you. You may hear that in meetings sometimes. My problem's me. No, your problem's not you. Your problem is lack of power. That's our problem. That's our dilemma. That's right out of the book. Lack of power. If you're powerless, then you don't have the power you need. So you need to seek that power. Lack of power, that's our dilemma. The second step, and this is the second concept I spoke about before, the second step is now going to explain to us what the solution to that problem is. Does everyone notice we didn't do any work on step one? Yes?
Yeah.
That it was just an acknowledgement, an acceptance. Why? Because step one doesn't get worked. You don't work step one. You don't work step two. 1 and 2 are information gathering steps only. Okay? So all step one is physical allergy? Yeah, that's me. Mental obsession? Yeah. So you're an alcoholic? Yes, I am. Good. Step 2. That's it. Have we complicated the hell out of this program? Yes, we have. Yes?
Talk about unmanageability.
Talk about I love a directive. I'm always good for a directive. Talk about unmanageability. Okay, I'll talk about unmanageability. I think the key piece about unmanageability would be, now that you bring that up, I distinctly remember sitting down with my sponsor to talk about the first step and saying to him, isn't the idea of powerless and the idea of unmanageability two separate concepts? I came to believe that I'm powerless, came to believe that I'm unmanageable. Couldn't that be like steps 1 and 2? And I mean, part of that is I always kind of knew how we could make the program better, which is my own ego. But I asked him the question, and what he explained to me was, if you look at step 1, you'll notice that there's a piece of punctuation in step 1 that doesn't show up anywhere else in the steps, right? Step 1 reads, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, hyphen, there's a dash, that our lives have become unmanageable. And he said that hyphen is there to let you know that while these are two separate statements, there is something that connects the statement, right? And what I realized at that point was the statements individually were no problem for me. I absolutely knew I was powerless over alcohol. I mean, I couldn't stop. I absolutely knew my life was unmanageable. It was once offered to me that a good definition for unmanageable is, are there many things in your life that you want to happen that keep not happening? And are there many things in your life that you don't want to happen that keep happening? That was my life in a nutshell. So I knew I was powerless, I knew I was unmanageable. What was difficult for me to wrap my brain around is that my unmanageability came as a direct result of my powerlessness. Came as a direct result of my powerlessness over alcohol. It didn't really seem possible because, I mean, while my behavior was pretty lousy when I was drinking, my behavior was pretty lousy when I wasn't drinking. So how could it all be about the alcohol? What I didn't understand, what you now understand, is that I was the victim of this physical allergy, mental obsession cycle all the time, whether I had alcohol in my system or not. Does that answer that question? So in step 2, we asked the question, what's the solution to the problem? I would ask that you turn to page 12. This is, again, not Roman numeral, regular page 12. And you're going to be in the chapter called Bill's Story, which is chapter 1 in the book. It's the chapter after the first chapter. To get you up to speed, because on page 12 we're about halfway through Bill's story. The reason Bill's story comes after the doctor's opinion is because in the doctor's opinion they've explained to us what alcoholism is. Now they're saying, now that you understand what the illness is, now we're going to give you the story of someone who's actually got the illness. Let's take a look at how it shows up in a human being. That human being, of course, is Bill Wilson. So Bill's story is just that, it's Bill's story. The first half of Bill's story, which we've just sort of jumped over, tells the story of Bill's manageability, his march toward drinking for oblivion. And it was a fairly long march, right? So Bill was manageable for a fairly long time until, like the rest of us, one day he wasn't. And at one point, Bill eventually starts drinking for oblivion, and he's now a hopeless, as Dr. Silkworth called him, unmanageable, unemployable, drunk, drinking round the clock, living in his bathrobe, essentially. One day, Bill gets a call from Ebby Thatcher, who I mentioned before. Ebby was a childhood friend of Bill's wife, Lois, but was also a longtime drinking partner of Bill's. And Ebby calls up, and he's been in the Oxford group, and he tells Bill, listen, I've stopped drinking. I'd like to come over and talk to you. And Bill basically thinks, yeah, right, you've stopped drinking. I've heard that before. You know, and figures, come on over, I could use some company. I mean, I got a half a bottle, and I'm all by myself. And Ebby does that. And upon opening the door, Bill can see that something in Ebby has fundamentally shifted. He can see, the book says he was fresh-skinned and glowing. There was something in Ebby's deportment that told Bill, this guy seems to have found something. This is not just he's not drinking. And Ebby comes in, and Ebby and Bill are sitting at the kitchen table, and you know, Bill offers Ebby a drink, and Ebby refuses, and Bill's drinking. And Ebby starts explaining to Bill the hope he's found, and how he stopped drinking, and what he's doing in this group. And Bill, for the most part, likes what he's hearing and is feeling hopeful, until Ebby says something that essentially kicks Bill out of the conversation. If you look at page 12, first full paragraph. Despite the living example of my friend, Ebby is a living example. I, hopefully, am a living example in that I was once a miserable drunk, and I stand before you not a miserable drunk. Right? So despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me the vestiges, the shreds, the tatters of my old prejudice. The word God, it's a big one, still aroused a certain antipathy. He didn't like the idea of God. Bill was not an atheist as we understand. He was something closer to a brand of agnostic. When the thought was expressed to me that there might be a God personal to me, the feeling was intensified. My own personal prejudice was intensified. I didn't like that idea. I could go for such conceptions, and this is him being an agnostic, really. I mean, the idea of a personal God didn't work for Bill. He grew up a Christian and had rebelled against that. The idea of a creative intelligence, a universal mind, a spirit of nature, any of those are plenty to do the second step, but he didn't know that yet. He resisted a thought of a czar of the heavens, right? God being this sort of majestical being on a throne with the staff and the beard and the whole thing. He rejected that thought. He said, I've since talked to scores of men who felt the same way. So two things. One, Ebby's talking to Bill. Bill likes what he's hearing. Ebby says God, and Bill goes, okay, check please. That's it. You don't want to listen anymore. He's also saying, I've since talked with scores of men who felt the same way. So they're saying it's not unusual for someone to come into AA and struggle with the whole God thing. It's actually very common. Okay, what then happens? Well, Ebby then presents Bill with a rather revolutionary proposition. Look at the next paragraph. My friend suggested what then seemed a novel idea. He said, and now you're going to notice the squiggly writing, right? The italics, which they use very sparingly in this book. Why don't you choose your own conception of God? Why don't you choose your own conception of God? Interestingly, in the paragraph before that, Bill told you about some conceptions of God that would have been okay with him. He just didn't realize that they were appropriate and fine. Universal mind, creative intelligence, spirit of nature. It doesn't matter what your conception of God is. But when Ebby says that to him, he gets it. Look at the next paragraph. That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain. So there was this mountain of ice, he's saying, between Bill and the sunlight of the Spirit. This icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. I had built an intellectual mountain that had stood in the way of me seeing the truth for many years. And when he said, choose your own conception of God, the mountain melted, and Bill got it. Bill got it. That his conception of a higher power was already more than he needed, not just enough, more than he needed. Why? Look at the next paragraph. Because, and here's some more italics, because it was only a matter of being what? What's the word? Willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. So the second step question is it possible, is there a chance that there is some power greater than you, some energy, some creative intelligence, force in this universe? Is it possible that there's a creative force in this universe more powerful than you and your thoughts and your problems? Is that possible? And if you can say, if anybody can say, yeah, anything's possible, that's your second step. That's all there is to the second step. Again, that doesn't have to be all there is to the second step for you. You can make this more complicated if you want to, but you certainly don't have to. The idea that to do the second step, you need to know who or what your higher power is, crazy. If you do know who your higher power is, fine. You know, if since you were a little person, Jesus Christ has been your Lord and Savior, and that totally works for you, that's extra credit. I mean, that's going to probably make your road a lot easier. But that's not a lot of people's experience. Question?
Real quick, what's your interpretation of the notion about the rooms as a higher power? I mean, anything's okay, or
The question is, what's my notion of the idea of the rooms as the higher power? Again, the experience, strength, and hope of this alcoholic, what I would say is the question of whether there might be a power greater than yourself. If the best way that you can wrap your brain around the idea that that power is manifesting in what's happening in here, that the idea of when all these individual drunks come together in a room, that something seems to happen that is more powerful than any of those individuals, that something happens within the group that is a manifestation of a higher power, that's more than adequate as far as I'm concerned. In fact, you'll often hear the idea that GOD stands for group of drunks, right? Absolutely. It's more than enough as far as I'm concerned, right? So the idea is not to overcomplicate this. All you need is some concept of a higher power, and also to be cautious to not get spirituality and religion all tied up in a ball. Because we're not talking about religion in here. We're not anti-religion. We're just not a religion. So you can practice a religion as a part of your spirituality, but what's going on in here is not religion. Very important. Okay? So here's your second step for those of you who are interested in doing one. If you'd like to do a second step, when I ask the first question, how many of you qualify as alcoholic? Okay? Of those people that put your hand up, how many of you can say that you either believe that there is a higher power or are willing to believe that there is a higher power? How many? Okay. So for those of you who have raised your hand twice, you're on step 3. Make no mistake about it. You now know what's wrong with you, and you know the solution to what is wrong with you. So you know that your problem is lack of power, that that's your dilemma, and you know that the solution to your dilemma is a power greater than human power, right? So now, based on your understanding of the problem and your understanding of the solution, we're now going to look at step 3. The third step is a declaration. That's all it is, an affirmative declaration. And a declaration is just something you say out loud. Okay? So we're going to look at what that declaration is. Before we do that, let's take a look at page 62. Now, the third step reads, specifically, before we get to 62, but you can turn there now, that we make a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Made a decision, right? Notice it doesn't say, turns our will and our lives over to God. Is anybody in here under the impression that that's what the third step is? Figuring out how to turn your will and life over to God? Or has anybody ever been told that? Okay, it's not. Made a decision. Think about it this way. 2 birds are sitting on a branch. One of those birds makes a decision to fly away. How many birds are left? 2. Because I said the bird made a decision to fly away, not it flew away. Those are 2 separate things. All that's happening in the third step is we're making a decision to turn our will and our lives over to God. The actual turning over happens in 4 through 12. Right? All we're doing in 3 is making a decision. We make that decision by making an affirmative declaration. Okay? And the principle of the third step is faith. I realize I didn't actually say the principle of the second step is hope. So 1 is truth, 2 is hope, 3 is faith. So if you look on page 62, there's just something I quickly want to call your attention to. In the first full paragraph on 62, notice it says selfishness, self-centeredness. That we think is the root of our troubles. Right? So we know from the first step that our problem is lack of power. That's our dilemma. Now we find out in the third step what the root of that dilemma is. It's selfishness. How many people in here have sat in a 12-step room and heard that this is a selfish program? A lot of us. It's sort of remarkable, isn't it? You talk about disparate information, right? The idea that you would tell a newcomer the root of your problem is selfishness. Selfishness is killing you. If you don't get rid of selfishness, selfishness will kill you. So the way we're going to get rid of this selfishness that can kill you is with this selfish program. That's madness. But you'll hear it every day in the rooms. This is a selfless program. I could sit here for a long time and quote you chapter and verse where this book again and again and again and again and again and again tells us that this is a selfless program. For the moment, 62 is what I'm giving you. This is a selfish program. To solve a selfish problem, you're going to need a selfless solution. Okay? Now we're going to look at this third step declaration that we're going to say. And you will find that on page 63, the corresponding page there, in the second paragraph, second line of that paragraph. And it's going to say, I offer myself to thee, right? God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. That's the third step prayer. Now, third step declaration. It's often called the third step prayer. The fact that it doesn't end in amen is actually one of the distinctions that tell us that technically it's the third step declaration. More importantly, if you heard that declaration now for the first time and either thought to yourself, wow, I don't know what that means, or, gosh, there's a lot of thys and thous in that paragraph for my taste. One, we don't want to get caught up in the language. So if you want to cross out the thys and the those and turn them into yous and yours, it's perfectly appropriate. Two, to do the third step, we're all, or those of us who care to, are going to say the third step declaration aloud together. Before we do it, let's make sure we understand what it means. So here's the breakdown I would offer you. God, I offer myself to thee. God, I'm giving myself to you. I don't pretend to know what I'm giving you because I don't know who the hell I am. And I don't really know who you are. I don't even know if you're there. But if you are, take the reins for a while. Let's face it, what's the risk? You probably couldn't manage my life worse than I have. So if you're there, take over for a bit. To build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Whatever you put me here for, show me. Because I am lost. I am without direction. Right? Relieve me of the bondage of self. Bondage to be a prisoner. I am a prisoner of myself. I'm a prisoner of my own mind. When I run the show, it's a train wreck, but somehow I can't stop running the show. Relieve me of the bondage of self, of that bondage of self, so I can better do your will. So I can let you do what I'm asking you to do, which is get in the game. Right? Remove my difficulties, not so I can be happy-go-lucky. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them, so as my difficulties become less difficult, that I may bear witness to see those I would help, so I can see where help is needed, right? And then be of help with your power, your love, and your way of life, rather than being of help my way, where I always have some kind of motive, right? Very, very, very powerful declaration. May I do thy will always. Right? So this is the beginning of the process of turning it over, is saying this declaration. So let's start with that. third step declaration. For those of you, anyone can participate who cares to, but especially for those of you who raised your hand for 1 and 2. Here's your third step. Third step declaration. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help. Thy power, thy love, and thy way of life, may I do thy will always. Now, the third step homework, if you will, is starting tomorrow morning, third step declaration every morning. God bless you. That's the beginning of the work. Third step declaration every morning upon awakening. Shouldn't take you more than about 15 seconds. And as my sponsor told me, and I will share with you, any morning that you can get up and go out and justify starting your day without finding 15 seconds for your recovery, you might want to go back and take a look at the first step. It's not about judgment. It's not about you being bad or wrong. But this is your first major commitment in the work. Further, all people who raised their hand for the first 2 questions and said the third step declaration and are willing to say it on a morningly basis, you're now ready for the fourth step. And when you come back next week, we're going to start talking about the fourth step, which is really where the real work begins. Before we close out step 1, 2, and 3, I want to share a bit of personal experience with you, something that actually occurred for me with my first sponsor. I'm from New York City. I moved here to this area in '03. And my first sponsor's name was Tom. And Tom and I sat down, and we did the first 3 steps together. And after I said the third step declaration, and he told me tomorrow morning start saying it every morning, he said, I also want to give you a directive, another piece of homework, if you're willing to say yes to it. Because again, this was his own idea. He said, but if you're willing to take the directive, you'll notice that the third step declaration talks about helping other people. He said, so starting tomorrow, I want you to start helping other people. And I'm going to tell you exactly what I want you to do. And I said, all right, what do you want me to do? And he said, starting tomorrow morning, when you, and this is New York City, so no one really owns cars unless you're filthy rich. We all take buses and subways. He said, starting tomorrow morning, when you leave your apartment, throughout the day, anytime you see an elderly person who you think might need your help, I want you to approach them and gently say, excuse me, can I be of service to you? He said, don't accost them with service. They may not want your help, right? He said, but if you see a little old lady trying to get across the street with a cane, trying to open a door, whatever, he said, I want you to go up, gently say, excuse me, can I be of service to you? He said, will you do that? And I said, yeah, Tom, I'll do it. But, you know, I got to tell you, I've been living in the city a long time. I never really see old people who need my help. And he said to me, well, then that'll be simple. You'll have nothing to do. He said, that's fine. He said, just get up in the morning, say your declaration, go out about your day, and if you see an elderly person who does need your help, you'll go up and say, excuse me, can I be of service to you? Will you do that? I said, yeah, all right, I'm in. The next morning I got up, said my declaration, walked outside. They were everywhere. Everywhere. I mean, it was as if they had been sort of crouched down in a parking lot waiting for this morning. Do you know? And when I tell you, I helped old people all day long. I mean, all day long. It was remarkable. At the end of the day, in addition to feeling really full and whole in a way that I hadn't before, I remember thinking to myself, you know, these old folks could not possibly have just shown up this morning. They must have been around. Somehow I didn't have eyes to see them. And I really got at that point that that's recovery. That's what happens in recovery. You becoming recovered doesn't change the world. It just changes your seeing, like a quarter turn to the left, and everything begins to shift and change. You know, it was once offered to me that if you could take all the information, all the knowledge known to man, and apply it to a pie graph, that one little slice of the pie would be what you know. right? And that one more little slice of the pie, about the same size, a sliver, would be what you know you don't know. Yeah? There's a lot of stuff we know we don't know. The rest of the pie is stuff that you don't know you don't know. Does everyone dig that? Stuff you don't know that you don't know. Recovery is all about opening up to the stuff you don't know you don't know. That is why that if you're new and you have some narrative in your mind about what it means that you're here or where this journey will take you, you are 100% wrong. Trust me on this. Not because you're not smart, not because you're not competent, but because this journey will be about the stuff you don't know you don't know. That's why we say things like, don't leave 5 minutes before the miracle happens. So,